Okay. What we're going to do in this next section of this chapter is look at an application of the AMPS model that we've been discussing in a previous video. So our focus in this section of the chapter is to learn how to illustrate types of strategic management questions and how management accountants will then go about addressing them using data analytics. So that's going to be our focus in this chapter. It's important to understand management accountants, they specialize in the types of questions that they answer. It's not that they answer all questions that can exist within a business, but they focus on this idea of performance, which often involves revenues and costs that we measure, and then control measures, making sure that we're monitoring the actual results versus, for instance, the budgeted results. So looking at things like budgeted financial statements and or budgeted estimations or reports, and then comparing that back to actuals. So what we're going to do in this section of the chapter is look at a mini lab where we are going to go through the AMPS process in order to answer some questions that we've outlined using actual data. So the type of analytic that we're going to perform in this lab is going to be descriptive. The key components that we're going to be thinking about is gross margin, which is going to be defined as net sales minus the cost of goods sold. If you've taken Accounting 111 with us, you know that we have also called this term gross profit. So you can use those synonymously for this mini lab. And then we are also going to use Excel as our software tool. And specifically, one of the tool resources that we're going to use as our software tool within our software tool is a pivot table. And we're also going to use pivot charts as we get to the illustration piece. Um, when we're looking at the context of this mini lab, we're going to be focusing on a merchandising company which sells products. Again, if you've had Accounting 111, you know that. And they make money, they create business value by selling their products for more than what they paid, what those products cost. And so, what we're going to do in this lab is compute gross margin for each sale and then identify the company's most profitable customers. That's going to allow us to focus on those profitable customers to engage them more, keep them satisfied so that we can overall increase profits even more by understanding, gaining that information that we turn into knowledge and understanding which customers are most profitable, we can hopefully become even more profitable. And so the company that we're going to use to do this is going to be called Fancy Fruits. They're a mail order business that sells exotic fruits, and they keep sales journals of each transaction, each sale transaction that has both sales and cost details for the products that they sell. And so the first thing that we're going to do is define the question. Within the AMPS model, we're going to ask, and the question is going to be which customers are the most profitable? And then we're going to use our data, which is going to be the sales journal that we have, in order to help glean insight into which customers are most profitable. We've got several different tasks that we have outlined. We're going to first compute gross margin for each sale transaction that takes place. Then we're going to organize the data to show profitability by customer. And then ultimately, we're going to want to identify which customers are the most profitable. So we're going to organize the data again in a certain sort of manner. And so let's go ahead and just start with this process. I'm going to probably refer back to these two slides here in a minute. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about sharing the story too, but I'm going to wait on that. But I'm going to refer back to these slides a few different times so that we can understand the steps that we're going to take. So since this is our first mini lab together, I want to illustrate real quickly what you would do in order to access that lab and ultimately follow along in this process. So first of all, I want you to realize where we're getting this information. So if we go on to your Connect class, so here you have access to Connect class. In order to get this, you could go to your Brightspace, go into any one of the chapters, and then click on any one of the Connect links, and then just go to the Connect home instead of going to the actual assignment. You'll get to something that looks like this. If you don't, you can open up this menu bar, click on the classes down and click on ACC 341 here. And then that will allow you to get to this view. Once you get to this view, you can click on your textbook. This is your textbook right here, and it'll open up your text. And where I'm at is page 23 on your text, at least this version of the text. And it's the mini lab that's within the chapter. And they kind of give you step-by-step instructions of what it is that they want you to do. So it's helpful to follow along and to try these. I encourage you to try these on your own, but I wanted to make sure you have an illustration of how to do it too, in case you we're interested in doing that. So first thing we're going to do is grab the data. We know the question. So if we look back, the question is which customers are most profitable. So we now need to master the data. So we've got to grab the data. The data that they tell us to access is Minilab1 data, which is an Excel file. So I want to show you how to get access to that too. So within Brightspace, again, if you go to general course information and then scroll down until you see additional course resources, and if you click on this ACC 341 textbook student-wide resources, this is gonna, once you download it, so if you click on it, you'll get into a web view of it. Let's see if it goes into it. Yeah, you'll get a web view on it, but what you need to do is download it. So actually download it. And so once you download it, it pulls up this document here. And these are all the different data files that you're going to use within the course. And so there's hyperlinks to each one of the data sets. And so we're using, if we look back at the information they told us, we're using Minilab1 data. So you just go to Minilab1 data, click on that. And once we do, we're given a data file that looks like this. So once you download it, it's going to be an Excel file. And you will need to use Excel in order to complete this Minilab. So I renamed this. I can't remember what the actual tab name was, but one of the first things I always do whenever I get data is to rename the data and say this is the original. In case I ever make a mistake, I can always go back to the original. The next thing I do is make a copy of it. And you won't see these steps, by the way, in your Minilab. This is just something that I do in practice, just because I know, having worked as an accountant over several years, I know there's always mistakes that can be made, and you always want something to compare back to the original. And of course, you could always download it again in this, example that's within an educational context. But sometimes it might be a difficult sort of process in cleaning up the data and getting the data where you need it to be in actual workplace setting. And so it's always good to keep an original copy and then use one that you're going to start to modify. So I'm going to call this modified version 1 here. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is calculate gross profit or gross margin. So I'm going to go up here and make a column here, gross margin, gross profit. I think what they want the term to use in this chapter is going to be gross margin. Notice they give us a task that we have to complete, and the first one is gross margin. So remember, we were defined from this text what they refer to as gross margin right here. Net sales minus our cost of goods sold. And again, I kind of went 11 refer to as gross profit. But we're given that information here. We've got sales and costs. In your text, they even give you just a little bit more data. So if you refer back to your textbook here, they give you a data dictionary for each one of the columns that you have. And you can see that sales is defined as total sales price of the product sold, and cost is referred to as total cost of the product sold. And so we know that that's the information we're dealing with in these columns. So what I'm going to do, change the format here, and I'm going to take sales minus our cost here. And so I'm setting this cell equal to column H minus column I in this particular row for this first example. And if you're not familiar with how to utilize Excel, there's an appendix in your back of your book that you can use in order to access that. I'm going to push enter real quick to get out of that, but they actually refer to that in your textbook somewhere in here. I think they make mention of where you can access information. Let's see. I don't know if they give it here or not, but you can open up here, go to the different chapters, and you can see, for instance, an Excel tutorial here for Appendix A. So you can just go right here to get more information on Excel. The other thing is don't forget that you're given cubicle assignments as well. And those cubicle assignments have you actually going through and learning how to use Excel. And so if you want more information on how to utilize Excel, you have several resources. You can also feel free to reach out to me. But first thing we're doing is calculating in this cell, sales minus cost to get our gross margin. And so we're going to do that by typing equal and then click on the cell we want minus the other cell we want, and then push enter or return. Okay, after that, there's a few different ways that we can copy down this formula. Excel already knows what it is that we want to do. As we drag this down, it knows that we now want to change it to the next row, sales minus cost, etc. And so we'll do that here. And I'm going to go ahead and click where this little square is in the bottom right-hand corner. Just double click that. And that's just going to fill all the way down, you can see all the way to the bottom at row 194, we now have the same formula that we wanted. It's the H minus the I based on whatever row we're at. So Excel automatically knows that. It's intuitive to copy those formulas down for you. And so once we've got that done, we've now completed our first task, which if we go over to what they asked us to do was to compute gross margin for each sale. And remember, this sales journal is an individual transaction for every single sale. So now we've computed the gross margin for every sale. The next thing that it wants us to do is calculate profitability by customer. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this entire data set. So I'm going to go to cell A1 here, A1, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to push, again, you can scroll down if you want to do this, but there's some shortcuts that you'll learn as you go through your Cubicle software. But I'm using a Mac right now. It'll be a little bit different with a PC. Cubicle will show you PC. I think you can also get the shortcuts for Mac as well. But I'm going to hold down Shift and Command and push down, and then I'm going to push over, and that's going to highlight all of the cells that where there's not a break, going down first and then over. So it's highlighted the entire data set because there's no break within this data set. Once I have that whole data set highlighted, I'm now going to go over to Insert, and I'm going to do a pivot table. And so in this pivot table, I could choose to do it in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. If I do a new worksheet, it's just going to add in another tab over here. If I do existing worksheet, I could click anywhere I want this to be. I've already highlighted the data set, so it's highlighted or filled in this table range over here, so I don't have to do anything with that. I can just push OK. And now I have a pivot table. I'm going to move this to the back here, though. Okay. I'm going to call this pivot table 1. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to organize the data using sort of various different functionalities. Pivot table combines things like sorts and various different functionalities, groupings that you can do all together in a single sort of analysis tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer back. I wanted to calculate profitability by customer, and we're defining profitability here by gross margin. And so really what I'm doing is looking at gross margin by customer and looking at overall, how does all of their sales transactions combine for each gross profit? How does that sum up? And so what I will do is take customer number, and I'm going to move it down to row. This shows me every single customer number. If you look at the field names, these are all the different columns that we had. And again, if you wanted to know what those columns have and the various different analyses you can do, look at the data dictionary that tells us what each column is telling us. So I've got customer number by row, so that'll tell me the various different customers I have. If I had customer name, I could use that too. I don't have that in this data set, but I do have customer number. And then the other thing I calculated gross margin, so I'm going to move that over into the values area of the pivot table. And notice what it's done now. It's summed. You can tell there's a lot of different, various different sort of features you can use. It automatically is going to default in this scenario to sum. So I'm going to use sum because what I want to know is in total, what is the gross profit produced by every single customer over all of their sales transactions? And that's what this is telling us. And then we can do a few things if we want to sort of clean this up. For instance, I might call this so that it's more clear customer number. Because it just said row labels and it's not really clear for a user of this data what that means. Make this a little bit bigger. You can tell that this is the sum of gross margin, so that's a pretty good label there. One thing that I might want to do, remember, it tells us that we want to calculate profitability by customer, but then we also want to know from a sorting function which customer is the most profitable. And so it would make sense to kind of sort that data then by showing us the most profitable, probably up top. So I'm gonna right click is what I'm gonna do. Right click here and then click on sort or highlight over sort, and then I'm gonna go to sort largest to smallest. And so this should be our most profitable customer right here, customer 247 or 2047. I can make this a little bit more comparable. You can kind of see that that number is not directly in line with this one. So I can do a little bit of quick formatting here. So I might go to formatting cells. Again, I'm just right clicking here. There's a number of ways you can do this. If you wanted to, you could kind of push Command 1. That's a kind of a shortcut for Mac at least here. But I'm going to click on formatting cells here. And I'm going to go into number, and I can kind of click on whatever I want it to be. Maybe I'll do this one right here. And I'm going to highlight actually all of these and do that. And then so I'm going to right click or push Command 1, and then I'm going to go to numbers, and I'm going to click on this one here. And, oh, sorry, I Double click. That gives me the detail of where it's pulling from. I didn't mean to do that. But now you can see my numbers are comparable. They're now in line with each one of the others. And so now I know which customers are most profitable and which customers are least profitable. But we learned as part of the sharing sort of process that a visualization tool is often useful in making your point when you're trying to communicate the results. And so one of the things I'm going to do is create a pivot chart in order to make this information more clear to someone who actually just might want to take a quick glance to determine which customer is most profitable. So I'm going to click in anywhere in these cells for the pivot table. I'm going to go to pivot table analyze. Again, there's a number of different ways you can get to this, but I'm going to go here and I'm going to click pivot chart here. And this automatically sort of defaults into what it thinks I might want as a pivot chart. And I think this one actually is going to look pretty good. I'm going to clean it up just a little bit. I'm going to say something like gross margin by customer, something like that, or total, maybe gross margin by customer for all the sales. And we could also define the period and whatnot. But point being is you can see pretty clearly that customer 2047 is the most profitable. And while you knew it when you looked at it over here as well, this sort of visual representation, there's a reason why they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words or something like that. You can see very clearly the size differential here. Here you have to convert it. Over here in numbers, you have to think that way. You have to convert it that way. This illustration makes it very, very clear the size comparison of which customers are more profitable versus another. And remember, whenever you're communicating the results, one of the reasons why managerial accountants have value is because they're communicating results to people that maybe don't think the same way as them. And so some people may lend themselves to a visual representation and understand that, conceptualize that a lot better than just looking at numbers. Others may look at numbers and that's where they sort of gravitate to. So it really depends on the user of the information as to how you're going to share and communicate the results. But here are two different ways. You could provide just the report, or you could also provide a visual representation with it as well. Now, what do we do with all this? Why did we communicate all this? Why did we try to calculate all this? Well, now we see which customers are most profitable. And this can allow us to start to make decisions of how do we become more profitable. By focusing, for instance, on this customer, by engaging and keeping them satisfied, we can maintain profitability. But perhaps by advertising to them more or meeting their needs better or offering add-on services, we can actually even enhance profitability. So this data can be used to not only maintain our profit, but also perhaps increase our profit. In the end, the reason why we created this visualization was to answer the question that we defined. The question was, which customers are most profitable? Here, we've clearly answered that question. So I'm going to stop this share and stop this recording for this portion of the chapter.